Hello, I'm Jim Manning, author of Patriotism, Unhinged, which is available worldwide through online retailers. Jim Fowles had a very, very interesting life from day of his birth. And we're going to let him tell you that story because it comes out better from him. And you can see how it affected his life, his mind, and probably his psyche. And it's germane to everything else that he did in his life. And to some extent, it's our government who may have made him what he became. It wasn't just by accident. And so with that, we're going to now show you the conversation with Jim about his start in life. This is Jim Manning from Patriotism Unhinged, and we're here today with James Fowles. James Fowles was a 28-year veteran of the Central Intelligence Agency and also a member of the Chicago outfit. And what a life he's had. And he's coming somewhat to the close, although I hope he's got 2 or 3 more years anyway. But I think he wants to now, so many people have misjudged him in some ways or for their own benefit said things. So this is a chance for him to get it out the way he wants to get it out and tell the truth. And so with that, Jim, welcome. It's a pleasure to meet you. I've been studying you for a long time, and it's earth-shattering to actually you and I having a conversation.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, and you noted that before this all started, and you went to Fort Bragg and then on to Laos. You grew up in a situation that sort of directed you in that way. And so why don't you start with that?
First of all, I wasn't a natural born baby. The woman that carried me was either my surrogate mother or my real mother, I'm not sure which. But she left home in 1941 because there was no work in Alabama where she lived at in Oakland. So she went down to Mobile, Alabama. She couldn't get a job. So she met this guy that was a captain of a destroyer. His name was Les Sutton. And that's where the name Sutton comes from me.
Mm-hmm.
He told her about this Navy birthing program, and there's no jobs available, and he'd try and get her into that, and she'd make some good money at it. So she went with Les Sutton to the Navy, and he talked to the people there, and they talked to her, and she spent a few days with them there, learning and talking to them and hearing about what was going on and what was happening. And at that time, the Americans were down on the Germans for trying to create the perfect Aryan soldier.
Right.
Well, the United States was doing the same thing, but it's called a Navy birthing program. And they wanted to come out with a perfect soldier, whatever, the results would be. So anyway, my mother got involved, and she got inserted. They put me in I like to joke about it, they put me in a milkshake container, shook me up, made a milkshake. Then they inserted me into my mother, and she carried me for 9 months, and I was born on January 24th, 1942. I didn't know none of this until I was later on in years in life, and I was born without a birth certificate. My papers were with an X number, X and so many numbers on it after, because the X meant experimental model that they were working on. I had my sister, she was, I think she was 4 or 5 years old. I'm not really sure. She got married when she was 16. But when I was a baby, very small, I'd go running through the house. I had this one aunt, I call her name was Inez, but I used to call her Annie Wildcat because she'd grab me up, I'd be screaming, I'd get on her nerves. She'd be out late partying the night before, and she'd grab me by one arm and throw me out in the yard to sleep with the animals. And So I used to joke about me being airborne when I was a baby.
Yeah.
And I'd go sailing, hit the ground, and scoot for ways and all scarred up, skin up. And my sister would run and get me, and she'd hide me under the wagon seat and wrap a quilt around me to keep me warm. And she'd bring me out a piece of cornbread and a glass of milk for my lunch, And she'd keep me out in the wagon until Annie Wildcat would take off and go hitchhiking into town, Jasper, Alabama, where she went and she partied with everybody or whatever she could. And what all she done, I don't know, because I was just a kid. So, but Inez, she was the closest age to my mother. And my mother may have told her that she'd been in the birthing program. And J.D., my sister's father, see, I didn't understand. I thought he was my father in the beginning.
Yeah.
And he would come see her at Christmas time because my mother and him was divorced and her birthday. And he'd bring her gifts, for her birthday and for Christmas, but he never brought me anything. And he would hardly even talk to me. He couldn't stand me hardly. And so I didn't understand it. Even after I got grown, he had no use for me. He didn't like me being around. And so my aunt was the one, Aunt Inez, my mother's sister, the oldest one, closest to her. Asley, her other sister, the younger one, she might have known about it, but she just, she didn't mistreat me. Just the only one that mistreated me was Inez. And that's the one I called Annie Wildcat. So as far as I know, during the 1942 season, there was 123 or 124 children born. And we all wound up going to Camp Hero together. We were rather at different times, on buses and trains and stuff. My mother explained all this to me when I was 16 years old because I got in trouble, and when I talked to my mother, she explained to me what it was all about and everything and why I was going to Camp Hero and this and that. I started going to Camp Hero when I was 8 years old. And I started training and learning. We ran the obstacle course, and we did a lot of things that grown men would do, but we wasn't as good as them, naturally, since we were kids. But they worked as hard all day, and we took classes at nighttime at school. And I learned to read and write and learn mathematics.
Camp Hero, there was indications that they were doing things to some children there. There were some children that were missing. At the school, the emphasis at the school was on mathematics, a lot of mathematics, things like how to talk on radios, how to look at maps and tell people how to fly into certain areas to drop bombs and things like that. So it was centered around, loosely around what the Germans were doing at that time, trying to make the area and race up. For some reason, they decided to take a gamble and see what they could do. And that was what was called Camp Hero.
And I was so preached to that mathematics would be the most important part of my life, that I would be using that to call in air support and artillery and different things like that. So we studied hard with that. So by age 10, I was able to throw a knife 35 or 40 feet at a human target that they had pinned up, and I would hit the kill zone every time with a knife at 35 to 40 yards. And, excuse me, not yards, but feet, 35 to 40 feet. And so we got all of our training. So by age 10, I was already considered what would be a preferred killer at that point. And so I kept on studying, going to school, going to Camp Hero.
Yeah, so that's where he was from 1950 to 1959. He went from there right into the Army, went through boot camp. He signed up for airborne.
On my 17th birthday, my mother signed for me, and I went into the Army, and I took my basic at Fort Lindenwood, Missouri. When I finished my basic there, I went to Fort Polk, Louisiana for AIT, which is Advanced Infantry Training. And I took that. And there, while I finished that up, I signed up for airborne because I couldn't wait to jump out of an airplane. They had this idea, it was great jumping out of airplanes. My orders got screwed up. They sent me to Fort Sill, Oklahoma, which was tracks with armored. They tried to get me to stay there, and I didn't want to stay there. So 10 days later, I finally arrived at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. I took more training there, and as we went through things, which at that point was Mackerel Reservation. Fort Bragg was known as Mackerel Reservation up on where we trained at and everything. And July the 10th, 1959, we shipped out for Laos. Well, I'd never even heard of Laos. And so I asked the one sergeant, I said, where the hell is Laos at? And he said, come here, you stupid hillbilly. And he showed me on the map. And I looked at him and I said, oh, okay. So I knew where we was going. We didn't wear no dog tags or anything. We wore civilian clothes and we went in there to Laos and worked on Plain de Jars. We call it the Jura Plains. Over there is known as the Plain de Jars. And so I had the southeast corner of the Jura Plains for my theater of operations that I worked on. And what we was there for, we was hiring Laotians. We were hiring them and training them to fight the Vietnamese. So we had about 10,000 of them come down from the north of Laos and join us, and we trained them, we fed them, we supplied them with weapons. And when we got through the training, the following day, like 5,000 of them went back north. And then we wound up fighting against them.
Laos is just the beginning of the story. You're going to hear a lot more. And his service in the airborne is just the very beginning of the man that he would become. My interview with James Fowles was groundbreaking. It was maybe the high point of all the years that I've been studying this situation. On YouTube, time is limited, and there's a whole lot more to his life than what we'll be able to tell you in probably 20 views. And so I would suggest that if it's something you're really interested in, that you can order his book, Primary Target. Here's the information on how to order it, and we'll share it in the description of this video. It is full of all kinds of stories of his life for 28 years as a contract mercenary for the Central Intelligence Agency, both in this country and in other countries. I think that as time goes by, those books will become more and more valuable.